All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. So let's talk about Jan Blachowicz and Israel Adesanya's fight because, but not in like here's what I think is going to happen. There's lots of channels that do that. I want to talk about the thing I'm good at, which is what happens in the event that each of these guys wins, all right? So I want to talk through each scenario because it's actually really interesting if you think about it. Now, if you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell. I try to be different, son. This is supposed to be a different kind of MMA channel. You got tons of guys that do extensive breakdowns. The Weasel, dude, MMA Guru, I've been watching some of his breakdowns. He's solid, man. Really solid. It's a small channel too. He's, 13,000 subscribers, but he does a really good job. That fucking guy needs to buy himself a camera. He would have a much bigger subscriber base. But yeah, he does great work, man. Really, really solid stuff. Give it a look. Anyway, and the reason why I can point you guys to those channels is because that's not really what this channel's all about. This channel's about the people, son. About the people, about the business, about the hype, about the stories, and just about being a fan. Like, I don't like oh, geez, well, do you think that guy's jab is going to be able to split his defense? Like, that's not even why this sport's exciting to me. And that's why it's not the kinds of things that I generally talk about. But, so if you listen to this video and you like what I talk about, then subscribe because this is all I talk about, stuff like this. All right, so let's say hypothetically that Jan Blachowicz wins, right? Or let's say hypothetically Israel Adesanya wins. And let's actually start with Izzy because I want to say something about him in general, all right? So one thing that I could say emphatically about Israel Adesanya, even regardless of the outcome of this fight, is people need to start putting some serious respect on his name as it relates to him being a champion. I'll tell you exactly what I mean, okay? So I want you to think about this guy as a fighter, as a competitor, and how he's handled his career. So the guy comes in, he does what he's going to do. He's a very accomplished kickboxer. He comes in, he says, I'm going to be the champion. He ends up fighting what we now know was a savage in his very first fight against Marvin Vettori. Wins a split decision. And everyone, at the time, Marvin Vettori was kind of an unknown entity. Someone was like, yeah, he looked great, but he had a real tough fight. People didn't realize how good the fighter that he beat was. He rips through the division. Then, as soon as he gets to where he's fighting for the belt, that's where you're like, whoa, right? Like, the Kelvin Gastelum fight, he had to dig real deep and he won. And then he knocks out, Whitaker like nothing. He just completely picks Romero apart and then he obliterates Paulo Costa. Like, he really steps up to the plate when he's been fighting for the belt. But think about the opponents that he's taken and then think about the fact that he's taken this Jan Blachowicz fight, okay? So look, when you're the champion, you have a lot of flexibility about who you fight. And this guy, more than any other fighter that I've seen that I can think of, is only after the absolute toughest fights. Like, he's looking for the absolute toughest opponents. And I know people are going to be like, oh, well, he says he doesn't want to fight Jon Jones. Okay, well, that's the toughest. I mean, dude, he is going to fight Jon Jones, obviously, right? But that fight is that is going to be a super fight. A super fight. And I think, candidly, what Israel Adesanya is doing is he's given it a couple years. He's waiting for Jon Jones to slow down just a little bit. And you want to know what I think that is? I think that is incredible strategy because the only thing that anybody's going to remember is who won the fight. Okay, no one's if Jon Jones goes into that fight undefeated, which I think he probably will, or there's a high likelihood that he will, then everyone's just going to remember that Israel Adesanya is the first one to beat him, right? Now, if Jon Jones slows down just a little bit before Izzy fights him, I have no problem with Izzy having strategically worked his way up to the greatest fighter of all time, potentially, right? But, just seriously, look, he took on Yoel Romero because no one else wanted to fight him. Like, Yoel was coming off a couple losses, but he was coming off of incredibly close split decision losses, okay? Like, there's no one who, beat up Yoel Romero. And look, the guy takes the hardest fights, and he's fighting Jan Blachowicz at 205. Now, I think a lot of people think that that this means that there's a soft champion at 205. I just think it means there's just not Jon Jones at 205. I think it's literally anyone else at 205 besides Jon Jones. He was like, okay, I'll take it. But do you think that which is a tougher fight, right? Jan Blachowicz or any fighter at 185, right? Obviously, Jan Blachowicz is the way more dangerous fight for Izzy to take. Way more dangerous. There's no one at 185 that's even in the stratosphere of as dangerous a fight to take as this guy who, if he touches you, he's like the Jan Blachowicz. I'm not going to call, I'm not going to go crazy and call him Francis Ngannou, but the guy, as it relates to power in that division, is probably unmatched. Maybe Thiago Santos. right? In terms of just like raw power, but I don't know, man. Probably Jan. Like, he's the most powerful 205-pound fighter in the world, including Jon Jones. And Izzy is choosing to go fight him, okay? So if Izzy wins, you know, does he defend 205? I mean, listen, like, he's just going to take the hardest fights. I think everyone thinks he's going to go back down to 185. I think it completely depends on how this fight goes. I just think he's going to take the toughest fights. And then when it comes to Jon Jones, he's going to be strategic about it, and he's going to take that fight when he thinks he can win it. So that's that. Now, with Jan Blachowicz, now if he wins, okay, and he could absolutely win this fight, okay, if he wins, you are going to start hearing a lot of noise about Jon Jones coming back to 205 to fight Jan Blachowicz, and it's going to be very uncomfortable because Jon Jones ain't coming back to 205, okay? So, you know, at least I don't think he's coming back to 205. I mean, like, once you bulk up to 250, like, I think someone said he's 254 right now. I mean, could he lose that weight and make 205? Of course. Would it be a horrifying, you know, like, just nightmare of having to cut all that weight that you just intentionally put on off? Yeah, of course. I don't think Jon Jones has any intention of going back to 205, but if Jan Blachowicz wins, he is going to be considered, I mean, there's no one who could give him more credibility as the champion at 205, because I talked about this in another video. It's like, and this also applies to Peter Yan, when a champion vacates the belt. Whoa. Jeez, my training, like, get out of my video. Oh, hi, Gabrielle. Why don't you get out of my video as well? Anyway, what was that?
I just needed paper.
Oh, anyway, so yeah, when a champion vacates a belt, right, and then you get someone who just takes the belt, like the vacant belt, they don't really feel like the champion to you until they defend it, right? Right? I mean, Jan Blachowicz, he's the champion. He's the undisputed champion, but he's the undisputed champion because Jon Jones vacated the belt, and then him and, you know, the other guy fought for it, which is Dominic Reyes, who also was not the champion. So, you know, but when he defends against a 185-pound superstar undefeated champion, he wins. Now he's a real champion, right? So there's a lot to gain for both guys, obviously. I think that Jan Blachowicz is getting no respect going into this fight. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be a very interesting fight. But if Jan Blachowicz wins, man, he is going to be a solid champion. And also, again, you will hear, will Jon Jones come back? If he knocks Izzy out, you are going to hear a lot of calls for Jon Jones to come back to 205. Because then all of a sudden, because the reason Jon Jones left 205, there were no exciting fights for him, right? There were no big exciting fights. If this fight does a lot of pay-per-views and Jon Jones sees that and then Jan Blachowicz wins decisively, you're going to hear a lot. First of all, Jon Jones is going to talk shit to Izzy on Twitter and it'll be hilarious. But also, you're going to hear a lot of hype around getting Jon Jones back to 205. But that's, you know, Jon Jones has a heavyweight title fight sitting right in front of him. Whoever wins, again, you know, between Francis and Stipe is going to fight Jon Jones. So anyway, that's what I've got. So subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. You know, wait, let me actually say one other thing. So as it relates to that, right? I heard a lot of people like, what, Jon Jones gets an immediate title fight at heavyweight? Yeah. Like, are you serious? Like, Israel Adesanya gets an immediate title shot at 205. Is anybody mad at that? Like, he's the undisputed champion at 185. He's defended the belt twice, and so he's going up. Jon Jones defended the belt 15 times at 205. Why would he not get an immediate title shot? As a matter of fact, I can do a whole other video on that. Anyway, if you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell. Peace.